My name is Nnamdi, and my opponent's claim is that the introduction of mandatory recycling laws will help reduce harmful emissions that destroy the Earth's environment. Her secondary claims that she uses to support are the following. Landfills emit harmful gases that pose major health and global hazards. Recycling is a simple act that anyone can contribute to, but there's no initiative for the public to do it. And the levels of trash discarded incorrectly worldwide contributed immensely to environmental issues. Although recycling's effect is undeniably positive, and it does benefit the Earth's atmosphere, the cost of funding such an initiative financially heavily outweighs whatever benefits that may come from instituting new laws. It would also be impossible to create uniform recycling laws as each region has its own environmental issues and needs. And in addition to all of this, recycling sites come with their own pollution which affect the planet adversely. So my response to our first claim is that mandatory recycling laws have been implemented in various regions across the country with little success. So the United States does not have a federally mandated recycling law, therefore wherever recycling is mandated, laws are not uniform and vary drastically from one another. In cities such as San Francisco, there are laws that make recycling and composting compulsory for everyone. However, in cities such as San Diego or Seattle, mandatory recycling laws extend to residential and business areas only. And in Florida, these laws only extend to business areas, and they're the only ones who are forced to participate in such an act. To force a uniform system on everybody in the U.S. would just make no sense because every region has its own environmental needs. Therefore, it wouldn't make sense for everybody to have the same set of laws to live under as far as recycling and all that. My second rebuttal is that the cost of instituting such legislation would outweigh the benefits. The cost of sending recyclable materials such as plastic and glass to landfills to be recycled often costs more than the amount of sending such materials to a landfill. In the state of New York, it actually got so expensive to send such materials as glass or plastic to landfills that they decided to just cancel the initiative completely to recycle. Well, people recycle, but it's like they canceled the initiative to make it mandatory. People will also be forced to pay additional taxes to support the newly introduced recycling laws. According to W. Kip Visucci, a researcher at the National Bureau of Economic Research, studies show that people of lower income are less likely to recycle than people of a higher income. Therefore, they would be less likely to be able to pay the fines for breaking such laws as well. And that kind of starts like a vicious cycle of people not being able to pay their fines for something that they wouldn't be able to do in the first place. All in all, the introduction of such laws would add more fiscal stress to the lives of people. This in itself would make it very difficult for people to comply with such legislation. My third rebuttal is that recycling plants also come with their own forms of pollution. Material thrown into a recycling bin is another form of trash. As with any waste, it has to be transported and processed somewhere. This means creating additional locations for potentially hazardous waste. These heaps of trash are grounds for bacteria disease and laundry, and lists of other unsafe. These heaps of trash are grounds for bacteria disease and laundry. The laundry list of other unsafe conditions. In addition to this, recycling sites are also industrial plants. This means that they are not without their own forms of pollution. And as in the case with recycling sites, waste produced is frequently mixed with large bodies of water, leading to broader scale pollution, quite the opposite effect that it's intended to have. In conclusion, by mandating recycling for everyone, there will be a plethora of new issues to address that would outweigh the benefits of the mandatory recycling laws. That would outweigh the benefits that mandatory recycling laws would have. It would be very difficult to create laws that work effectively for the entire nation, as each area has its own needs. In addition to this, it would cause an additional financial burden that would outweigh the price of more traditional ways of managing waste. And finally, the act of recycling does not come without its own byproducts, which are hazardous to the environment, therefore canceling whatever effect it was intending to have on the environment at a much more expensive cost.
Well, you signpost your secondary claims pretty clearly. I think you do a nice job presenting it also. I like the summary at the end that makes your argument as clear as it can be. I do think that there's a lack of discussion of what the advocates' arguments are. There's not really any challenge to the evidence that they present or the reasoning. You do have some information that you're using on the individual points, but that's often incompletely cited. For example, on the first point, you mentioned the rules in San Francisco and compare them to Seattle and San Diego. I'm sure you got that information from someplace, but it's not really cited here. And then there's this whole argument about that the forcing a uniform standard on people would be undesirable, that there's not a single generic way to do this that would be appropriate. I think that's probably true, but you don't even have a hypothetical example to explain why we need to have something different from, Utah to Missouri, for instance, and it shouldn't be hard to come up with at least a hypothetical to explain why the rules might need to be different. The cost over the benefits argument is really kind of a disadvantaged discussion that may not be completely relevant here, except, of course, that the advocate is talking about a pseudo policy claim. So I think I can give you a little bit of leeway in including this. The New York example needs to be a little bit clearer. Again, there's not a citation of the source. I didn't think you made this up, but you do want to cite the sources on that. You did have a quote from one expert, though, on this point that you did cite, suggesting that in the long run, lower income people would have a little bit of problem complying with this, that it's really the influence, people who are well off are the ones most likely to comply with these laws, or I shouldn't say comply, but the ones most willing to recycle. So in essence, I think your argument here is that mandatory recycling laws would most strongly, or most strongly have a greater weight on people of a lower economic status, and that there's something problematic with that there's some harm would occur as a result of that. I don't think we get quite a discussion of the harm. You just assume they wouldn't be able to pay the fines and that there'd be a problem. Why they wouldn't cooperate instead of having to pay the fines is not explained. So I think there are a couple of steps missing in that argument. And then the third point really talks about the fact that recycling does contain potential pollutants in the process. I was a little bit confused about some of the recycling stuff when you're talking about the landfills. The transportation issue, I think, makes sense. The water issue, again, I think is probably a good point, but again, there's not really a citation of evidence on those points. Those are mostly asserted here, and I think a little bit of proof would go a long way to making that argument better. Like I said, there's not much discussion of what the advocates' arguments are either. All right, thank you.